Hello, everyone. We're going to give it about a minute before we get started. Let others start getting on the webinar. We're going to have a good turnout, almost over 700 registrations. So we're just going to wait here a couple of minutes, no more than a minute. Okay, we've got a good number with us. Greetings, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. I'm Paz Artaza Regan. I'm the program manager at Catholic Climate Covenant. I'll be moderating today's webinar. We're delighted that you're joining us today. We're going to be exploring the connections between food and climate, how our food choices, how our purchasing of food can heal our common home. I'm on the camera right now, but I will be going off in about a second. Hopefully that did it. So as always, I always get us started with a little bit of housekeeping. The video is being recorded, so you will be getting a link to it, to the recording, within the next couple of days. We'll also send you a link to the slide deck if all my panelists are okay with it. There'll be Q&A at the end of all the presentations. You may submit your questions by writing them in the question box in your control panel. It should be on the right side usually of your screen. You may wish to indicate when you ask the question who the question is for, which of the presenters, or if it's for 3 presenters, you can say that as well. If you're having any audio issues, it's most likely that it's due to Wi-Fi issues. That's been our understanding. So that if you're having that, try connecting through the phone for audio. And to do that, you just go to that little area where it says audio, click phone, and call in. So now they'll give you the directions as how to do that. We also always start with prayer. So I ask us to center ourselves, remember that we are always in the presence of God. And if you will join me in this prayer that was done for World Food Day in 2016 by Education for Justice, that was a program from the Center of Concern. So join me in this prayer. We are all connected, and the flooding in Bangladesh, the drought in Malawi, in Brazil, and the violent storms in the Caribbean leave our sisters and brothers' bowls empty. The least of these are hungry, and their cries for bread echo Christ's call for compassionate action. Everything is connected, and Francis reminds us to feed the poor today means to attend to climate change, to see how it is happening to so many poor farmers, to feel the effects of the flooding, the droughts, the changes in temperature as crops lay stunted or ruined in the fields. We struggle to restore and renew creation as we struggle to ensure that all can taste the abundance of this gift, this earth. May we all work for a future that Pope Francis holds up for us, where we can recognize the sacred connections that bind us to one another and to our common home, where we are all called to the table. Amen. We have 3 wonderful presenters joining us today. Be introducing them briefly here at the beginning, and then each of them will present, and afterwards we will have the Q&A. First speaking will be Jillian Semaan. She's with the Earth Day Network. Jillian spent much of the last decade as an appointee to the Obama administration as Chief of Staff for Civil Rights. During her tenure, she focused on farmers of color, disadvantaged communities, and food access issues. Her passion lies in food and agriculture, and with her current role, she's focused on the intersection of food, climate, and human health. I particularly want to say that we're welcoming Jillian. It's her first week at Earth Day Network, so we really thank her for taking this on her first week. Next after that will be Sarah James. Sarah is an investor and citizen consumer for Equal Exchange. For 25 years, she operated her own consulting practice in community sustainability planning. She co-wrote the award-winning book, The Natural Step for Communities, How Cities and Towns Can Change to Sustainable Practices, which has inspired the founding of over 30 eco-municipalities in the United States. At the end will be Kelly Moltzen, who is a tireless advocate of making connections between food, faith, and social justice. She's co-convener of the emerging Interfaith Public Health Network. Kelly was a 2015 Regenerate Fellow with the Food, Health, and Ecological Wellbeing Program of Wake Forest University School of Divinity, and is a professed member of the Secular Franciscan Order, where she is a member of the Ecumenical Interfaith Committee for the National U.S. Secular Franciscan Fraternity. At this point, I am going to invite Jillian to start. Jillian?
Thank you, Paz, so much for not just the invitation, but for allowing me this platform and Earth Day Network to be part of this greater conversation. So if you all don't know, Earth Day Network's mission is to diversify, educate, activate the environmental movement worldwide. And we are really excited for Earth Day 2020. And at the end of the presentation, we'd love to mobilize many others. So we could talk about that a little bit further. But today, what I would like to talk about is a campaign that we have within the Earth Day Network called Foodprints for the Future. And okay, here we go. And we're going to, today I would like to talk about the intersection of food and climate and what solutions we can have, because we know food has many connections. We're connected through food in many ways, and food has its impact on the climate, has its impact on access and environmental and food justice issues. It has an effect on our health, and it's a huge part of the culture. Our food print measures the environmental impact associated with the growing, producing, transporting, and storing of our food. And we really feel like this campaign, we really want to amplify the message of how we can reduce our carbon footprint. And one of the greatest ways to do that is through food. And you'll see here, scientists estimate that agriculture is responsible for approximately a quarter of all global greenhouse gas emissions. And animal agriculture is estimated to account for 80% of this number. If we could just bring that number, if we could scale that number back a little bit, we'd really have quite the impact on this planet. Let's see. I'm sorry for the pause. I'm trying to go to the next slide. Okay, there we are. Food and climate change. UN environment globally, if food waste could be represented as its own country, it would be the third largest greenhouse gas emitter behind China and the US. If you think about the impact that we have when it comes to food and climate change, we waste 30 to 40% of our food supply. 133 billion pounds of food, $161 billion, and 141 trillion calories. Food isn't accessible to everyone. And while we see these numbers in food waste, we have to ask ourselves, what is it that we can do? How can we play a greater role to reduce our carbon footprint? And we really had to think about how much energy goes into producing our food, how many miles goes into the transportation of our food. We really need to take a look at what we are buying, putting inside our bodies, and how that is affecting not only us personally, our health, but our carbon footprint. How do we want to leave this earth? Do we want to leave it in a better state than what it is right now? Because at the rate we're going, scientists have said that we have less than 50 to 60 years of farming on this planet. So if you think about that in terms of farming, if you think about that in terms of how many harvests we have, and if we really don't take action and do our part, then in 50 to 60 years, when we leave this earth to the next generation, they're not going to have a planet to live on. So we really need to think about that and what we can do, because as global meat consumption increases, so does its climate impact. In this slide, you'll see where we talk about food justice, and food justice has been an issue for a very long time. If you have better access to food, you could have healthier things to eat. We'll all be healthier, and the planet would be healthier for it. And when I talk about the planet being healthier for it, we often don't make the connection from our food to our soil, and that's the connection I would like everyone to make. Because the food that we eat, the direct impact is in the soil. If we can't take care of the soil, which is climate related, we will not have a healthy planet to live on. Our food would not be healthy. We need to be able to regenerate our soil that is in its most organic stage. And when we talk about food justice and access and sustainability and community, we also need to think about what it is that we can do to allow food justice to be at the center of the table. How can we have access to better foods? And our government has had a lot to do with that, unfortunately, in designing where grocery stores are and farmers markets and things like that. But we in our own communities need to be advocates for more farmers markets, for places that sell healthier and produce healthier foods. When we talk about food and health, recent evidence from large studies indicate that long-term consumption of increasing amounts of red meat, and particularly of processed meat, is associated with the risk of total mortality. You have cardiovascular diseases, type 2 diabetes. The correlation of food and health is one that many doctors make. It's cancer patients will make it. Anyone with an illness, or let's say you have a cold, someone who's eating a plant-based diet, their immune system will likely bounce back quicker than someone who has been putting processed foods in their bodies. If you're consuming a lot of red meat, if you're consuming a lot of meat in general, it's important to ask yourself, how are you feeling? What are your cholesterol levels? What is it that you can do to be able to take some measures to become a healthier you, for your spirit, your mind, your body? We have an obesity problem in this country. And we need to do a better job in looking at the American diet and say, how can I take charge of what I'm putting in my body, and how do I know what I'm putting in my body is healthy for me, and what I can do moving forward. Everyone wants to know what they could do. We try to make this correlation with food and climate, and a lot of people ask, everyone wants to know how they could help mitigate this climate crisis. And there are a couple of, it may not sound simple, but when I think about it, when I think of having food as a solution and addressing climate, I immediately think of the food that we eat. Because of animal agriculture and how much it contributes to greenhouse gas emissions, that is the number one thing that anyone can do to help mitigate this crisis. It's honestly as easy as that. It's not as easier said than done, but I'm also not advocating for everyone to stop eating meat altogether. But what we do need to do is scale back a little bit, is say, let's make a commitment to go meatless on Mondays, or I know during Lent, and this is something that we've always done, is not eat meat during Lent. Just kind of have it in the back of our mind where climate is the main issue of what we are seeing happening to this planet. We are seeing more fires, we're seeing more devastation worldwide. And why is that? There is science behind that. There is science that says, the amount of water that is used for agriculture, the amount of emissions that go out to produce red meat, and dairy even, that we can actually have an impact if we stop eating less of it. And some people ask, if you stop eating less, what is that going to do? Well, there will be no demand for it. And if we don't transform our food system and the way that we think about food and the way that we think about this planet altogether, we're going to have a huge problem. As you can see on this slide, we're going to need to feed 9.7 billion people. And we need to change the conversation of, yes, all of those people need to be fed, but let's feed them in the way that is going to be the most sustainable and healthiest for the betterment of ourselves and of the planet. And like I said earlier, as global meat consumption increases, so does the climate impact. And we are seeing the climate negatively impacted for quite some time now. And, for me, I would have to say, and Earth Day Network, and for our campaign, that, going meatless, a day a week, 2 days a week, will definitely impact what is happening. And you could see on this slide, if you replace 10% of meat with plants, you are saving 23,000 gallons a year in water. If you're replacing 100% of meat with plants, you could see it's 238,000 gallons per year. The amount of water emissions that are caused by animal agriculture is something that is rising, and we need to do a better job of being able to bring those numbers down and allow our bodies and our planet to be in a healthier state. And this particular slide is the US population. So these numbers are pretty telling of what a world that is less impacted by animal agriculture can look like. And I want to talk about simple swaps. These are not all the swaps. Some people are like, oh, I have to eat meat. I have to eat meat every day. I come from a huge Middle Eastern family where I grew up on lamb, and I grew up on a lot of meat. But it's really easy to make certain swaps. I am now plant-based because I felt like it was better for not just my body, but for the planet, for the animals. I would like to leave this planet in a state that is in a very natural state and not harmful. If you have beef, you could swap beef out for beans or legumes, which they have the same amount, if not more, protein in them. Eggs, there are great alternatives for eggs. There's a product called Just Egg, which is, like, I will be honest in saying it tastes just like an egg. It's made out of mung beans. Milk, there are alternative beverages for milk, oat, soy, almond, cashew. While some may argue that almonds, they do take a lot of water to produce, it's still far less than the production from a cow. But then you have our alternatives like oat and soy and cashew that does not use the same amount of water. You could swap avocado for butter. So there are so many simple swaps that we could make in our daily lives. If you're going to get a burrito today, get a bean burrito instead of one with meat. Just try something as simple as going meatless on Mondays, and you will be reducing your carbon footprint. So I will end in saying that we really want to make the food system is responsible for over a quarter of all greenhouse gas emissions. So we want to be able to focus our efforts in a way that will improve the highly integrated global food systems. And we want to be able to do it in a way that protects our planet and can be done on every level. So thank you, all of you, for listening. I'm sure there will be questions at the end of this. Earth Day 2020 is in April, and we are very excited about it. So these resources will be available. I know Paz will send them around, but also some of the resources is, creating a fruit and veggie swap ministry. There's a Dirty Dozen list that maybe if you want to have organic vegetables, and fruits. It's a fruit and vegetable list where it will show you a list of all of those that are pesticide free, herbicide free, that are the best ones to purchase. And then there's also, if you'd like to try your hand at a vegan recipe, Mojadara is on there. Just a way to maybe incorporate a new dish into your diet. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate you all listening, and I look forward to questions at the end of this.
Great. Thank you so much, Jillian. It's a good introduction, a good way to get started. The next two speakers are going to really go more granular to what we can do in certain ways as parishes, as individuals, as members of Catholic communities. Sarah, at this point, I'm going to call upon you. And for those that have been asking, yes, we will get you all the links that people mention. At the moment, there are two of them that are in your box called handouts. One is that from Equal Exchange, which is what Sarah's going to be talking about. And the second one is from Kelly, and she'll explain that one. But for now, Sarah, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Paz, and thanks, Jillian, for a really interesting and informative and thought-provoking presentation. And hello, everybody, and I'm so excited there's so many of you here today and interested in this, in the important relationship between food and climate change. The first thing that usually comes to mind, wait, go back, Paz, if you could, please. Thanks. The first thing that usually comes to mind when we talk about climate action are things like renewable energy, energy efficiency, green buildings, or taking a bike instead of a car. But how about the relationship between the morning cup of coffee we drink and climate action and the other food choices we make? We're going to take a closer look at this relationship and how supporting authentic fair trade is climate action in the realm of food and agriculture. Next slide. Deforestation is a significant contributor to global greenhouse gas emissions, 10 to 11%. And conventional coffee growing has been a contributor to deforestation as well. In Central America alone, 2.5 million acres have been deforested to grow coffee. And conventional agriculture is supposed to be responsible for almost 80% of deforestation. Conventional coffee growing and agriculture use petrochemicals for fertilizer and pesticides, and these are poisoning the earth, the water, and are toxic for the farmers that are using them. On the people side, 120 million people depend upon the coffee economy for their livelihood, and most of the poor people in the world rely upon agriculture for their livelihood. Interestingly, U.S. customs agents at the U.S.-Mexico border say that of the people who come to the border trying to get into the U.S., over half of them had agriculture as their livelihood. Next slide. So how is fair trade farming related to climate action and sustainability? First of all, fair trade coffee farming grows shade-grown coffee, which does not involve cutting down trees, but rather using them to provide the shade. This halts deforestation. And fair trade farmers also plant trees, which restores the forests. And as rebuilding the soil carbon sponge, I just want to underscore what Jillian said, that soil is being recognized as an increasingly important element in not only halting climate change, but actually reversing the heating process, and has the potential, along with revegetation, to actually lower the temperature of the globe. Forests are home to 90% of the land-based animals, birds, insects, plants. Fair trade farmers farm organically and use no synthetic pesticides or herbicides. They conserve and protect water. In fact, CRS is working with many farmer co-ops in Central America on this very subject, how to conserve water and during the farming process, and protect it and not pollute it. Fair trade farming also meets farmers' human needs, allowing them to earn their livelihood in place with no need to migrate. Next slide. So how is fair trade? What is fair trade, and how does it work? Yeah, just there we go. That's it. Yeah. First of all, fair trade sources from small farmers, not large plantations, not major agribusinesses. Fair trade guarantees a minimum fair price to farmers, which protects them in events when the price of their coffee or product plummets, as happened in the last couple of decades when the price of coffee dropped drastically, giving farmers just cents on the pound for their coffee. Many of them went bankrupt and lost their farms. Fair trade encourages and supports the formation of democratic cooperatives of farmers, which give farmers a stronger voice in the trade process, better access to markets, and also credit. In the event that the price of the coffee or product goes higher, this profit is returned to the farmer co-ops to invest in improvements such as needed healthcare facilities for their communities or upgraded equipment. Fair trade allows no child labor or forced labor, and also practices climate smart agriculture, as we've talked about, growing shade-grown coffee, not cutting down trees, planting trees, using organic agriculture techniques, preserving water, and rebuilding soil, which also creates a more nutritious, tasty food product and provides a carbon sink, and together with revegetation in the forests can cool the earth. Next slide. So besides coffee, here are some other fair trade products that we can buy and enjoy. Tea. Fair trade tea, cocoa, chocolate, which comes from the cacao plant that we see here in this picture, nuts such as cashews or almonds, avocados, and bananas. And buying and consuming these fair trade foods is a climate action, because we're supporting the climate actions of the farmers that grow and produce these foods. So this is a way we can all help. Next slide. Mama Tierra Coffee is a result of a partnership between CRS, Catholic Relief Services, and Equal Exchange, the trade organization with whom I'm affiliated. And CRS and Equal Exchange work in partnership with a farmer cooperative in Oaxaca, Mexico, called SEPCO. and they produce this coffee. You can see the picture on the lower right are the farmers in the SEPCO cooperative, and each purchase of Mama Tierra, either a bag like we see here on the slide or a case, results in a contribution to CRS's work with small farmers in Central America. Next slide. Equal exchange is one of the oldest fair trade businesses in the United States. It was founded in 1986, and it sources its coffee and other products that we just saw on the previous slide from over 40 farmer cooperatives in Central America, Latin America, Africa, Asia, and the US. And Equal Exchange was one of the first US trade corporations to help develop farmer cooperatives. And Equal Exchange practices what it preaches. It too is a democratic worker-owned co-op of 120 members. You see them here in the picture on the lower right. And this too is one of the largest in the country. Next slide. So what can we do to support fair trade as a form of climate action? As said, we can purchase and enjoy and drink fair trade coffee and the other products. We can educate ourselves better about where our food comes from. Where is it being produced? Who's producing it? What are the conditions for the people who are producing it? What's happening to the environment in which it's being produced? We can use our power as consumers. This is a very powerful tool that I don't think has been used strongly in this country since the grape strikes of the 1960s, which resulted in a remarkable shift in how the grape workers in California, the conditions under which they were working. We can lobby the places that we buy our food to supply more fair trade products and to avoid products that exploit people and the environment. And we, as individuals, but also as the members of the organizations of which we're a part, can ally with fair trade organizations in support of our common goals, for example, saving the earth. Next slide. So in closing, I would just like to leave you with this wonderful quote from a farmer in the Norandino cooperative in northeastern Peru. And I'd just like to give you a minute to read it yourself before I close. This farmer expresses a beautiful way of saying that we should bring our values and principles as climate activists, members of faith-based organizations, and sustainability advocates into the choices that we make as consumers, in our choice of coffee to drink, but also what food we purchase and consume and products we buy. And in aligning with fair trade and other sustainability organizations, we can begin to gain the ability to change the misguided food and governmental systems in order to restore our planet. Thank you all. Look forward to questions.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, and questions will be coming at the end of the three presenters. I remind folks to put your questions in the question box. We already have a few, so hopefully we'll get to all of you. At this point, Kelly, I'm going to be giving you control of the keyboard and mouse. So hopefully you have it now.
Great, thank you, Paz. So yes, my name is Kelly Moltzen, and I am a convener of the Interfaith Public Health Network, which is a new network that seeks to engage faith communities and their allies to improve health by addressing the underlying determinants of health, which include social, commercial, environmental, and political determinants of health. So in Laudato Si, Pope Francis states that it cannot be emphasized enough how everything is interconnected. When we speak of the environment, what we really mean is a relationship between nature and the society which lives in it. We need to see ourselves as interconnected with the earth. and eat in such a way that acknowledges this interdependence, or what is called integral ecology in Laudato Si. Caring about the environment is not just something external to do, such as turning the lights off or advocating for clean energy, but it's about seeing ourselves as creatures of the earth and humbly acknowledging that how we nourish ourselves is directly connected to sustainability of the natural resources that we rely upon, and also affects our health as well. Today, I will give a background about food systems and the food-climate connection, highlighting a recent report from Eat-Lancet Commission. Then I will discuss things that we can do individually and collectively to advocate for changes at the policy, parish, school, and individual levels to tackle the issue of food and climate. Sorry, Paz, I don't see the, there it is, okay. Okay, so here are the stages of the food system. Later in the presentation, I will review tangible activities we can do to impact sustainability within each stage. But as you can see in the diagram, we can impact how our food is produced, whether we eat locally or food that has been transported a far distance, if we eat whole or minimally processed foods or foods that are much more heavily processed, which foods we choose to consume, and whether or not food is wasted or composted. Our decisions along each part of the food system have the opportunity to either lead to more ecological destruction or to be regenerative, even sequestering carbon dioxide and storing carbon in the ground. There is substantial scientific evidence that links diets with human health and environmental sustainability. Yet the absence of globally agreed scientific targets for healthy diets and sustainable food production has held back large-scale and coordinated efforts to transform the global food system up until now. To address this, the Eat-Lancet Commission convened 37 scientists from 16 countries in various disciplines, including human health, agriculture, political sciences, and environmental sustainability, to develop global scientific targets for healthy diets and sustainable food production. This is the first attempt to set universal scientific targets for the food system that apply to all people on the planet. The report states transformation to healthy diets by 2050 will require substantial dietary shifts. Global consumption of fruits, vegetables, nuts, and legumes will have to double, and consumption of foods such as red meat and sugar will have to be reduced by more than 50%. There is one goal, 2 targets, and 5 strategies proposed by the Eat-Lancet Commission I will touch on briefly. Sorry, I don't, okay. All right, staying within the safe operating space for food systems, which defines scientific targets for diets that optimize human health and environmental sustainability, requires a combination of substantial shifts towards mostly plant-based dietary patterns, dramatic reductions in food losses and waste, and major improvements in food production practices. Okay. In line with the USDA's MyPlate recommendations, a healthy diet should be comprised by half fruits and vegetables, and the rest largely whole grains, plant-sourced protein, and unsaturated plant oils. Very little of our diet should be comprised of animal-sourced protein and added sugar. While traditional recommendations tell us a serving of protein or meat is 3 ounces, which is the size of your palm, or about 213 calories worth of beef, Eat Commission recommendations are 30 calories worth of beef, lamb, and pork, and 62 calories worth of chicken and other poultry per day. However, in North America, the typical diet exceeds recommendations for red meat, eggs, poultry, dairy, and starchy vegetables, and falls below recommendations for whole grains, legumes, nuts, fruits, vegetables, and fish. Dietary changes from current diets towards healthy diets are likely to result in major health benefits, such as preventing approximately 11 million deaths per year, which represent between 19 to 24% of total deaths among adults. So as you can see, human health and environmental health are inextricably connected, and we can actually solve a lot of the environmental issues and health issues at the same time through our food. In order to transition towards sustainable diets, we need to look at sustainable food production. Currently, baseline projections of environmental pressures in 2050 put us at 10,000% biodiversity loss above the planetary boundary and exceeding many other measures of sustainability. In order to have the greatest impact and come the closest to remaining within the planetary boundaries, we need a combination of improving production practices, reducing food loss and waste, and dietary shifts. The EAT report lays out specific recommendations for the actions that need to be taken in order to achieve these goals. The strategies recommended in the EAT report include a combination of political action, reorienting agricultural priorities, and reducing food losses and waste by half. In order to shift supply towards sustainably produced food that is healthy for people and environment, we also have to shift demand. And so there is a combination of individual and collective actions that we can take. We can do work through creation care teams, school sustainability and wellness councils, and personally, but this work can include not only changing those institutions, but also be part of a collective action to hold corporations accountable to changing their practices and demand that elected officials advance policy priorities that support sustainable agriculture and reduction of food waste. We can reorient agricultural priorities through holding the federal government accountable to shifting Farm Bill subsidies. U.S. Farm Bill has not changed much in decades, and agricultural subsidies do not reflect government recommendations for a healthy plate. Corn and other grains, which are often used as feed in animal agriculture and make their way into processed foods such as high fructose corn syrup, make up 61% of U.S. agricultural subsidies, while fruits and vegetables, which should make up half of our diets, only comprise less than 0.5% of agricultural subsidies. We don't even grow enough fruits and vegetables in the U.S. in order for people to meet the U.S. dietary guidelines for fruits and vegetables. The Good Food Purchasing Program of the Center for Good Food Purchasing has been implemented in various cities and school districts throughout the country, including Los Angeles, Chicago, Boston, Washington, D.C., and New York City. It promotes government food procurement in line with 5 value categories: local economies, environmental sustainability, valued workforce, animal welfare, and nutrition. So these values could really help to transform this food system if enough governments work on actually changing their food procurement in order to meet these guidelines. Many areas have a system in place where a group buys food directly from farmers on a regular basis. Called community-supported agriculture, church-supported agriculture, or farm shares, these programs give the farmers a sense of security as members pay in advance so farmers know how much food to grow, as they will have already received payment for it. Food is fresher this way, certainly seasonal and local, and buying as a group can help to make the prices more affordable. Harmony Farm, run by the Dominican Sisters in New York, runs a farm share with their biodynamically grown produce, as an example. African American churches in Baltimore and beyond have begun a network, the Black Church Food Security Network, where churches are growing food on their church property, as well as purchasing food from Black farmers in the area. This helps to spur the economy by providing opportunities for Black farmers to earn income by growing food, as well as boost health through improved access to fresh, healthy food. In addition, Soul Fire Farm in New York has initiated a reparations map, which provides a means to identify farming projects led by communities of color in different areas that can use support in order to correct disparities in wealth that have resulted from long-standing structural racism that dates back to slavery. There are many things parishes and religious congregations can do to improve the food system. Green Faith has a good food toolkit that includes an assessment of your congregation's food sourcing and practices, and steps to take for improving your congregation's food sustainability and justice policies and practices, and involving your faith community through implementing this plan. Other actions include utilizing land from religious congregations to grow food, starting a farm share site at your church or other organization, working with dining services to take the Cool Food Pledge, and change food procurement to standards of the Good Food Purchasing Program. raising awareness about the link between food and climate by screening a food-related film, and educating your congregation about the Eat Lancet report and that connection between food and climate. Supporting food justice initiatives. The Real Meals campaign is one such example, very similar to what the Cool Food Pledge and the Good Food Purchasing Program are doing. Advocating for programs and policies that incentivize selling of healthy plant-based foods, especially in low-income communities where they're typically more difficult to get these healthy foods in order to be affordable for people. Here's an example of a Catholic church in the Bronx that partnered with the community food advocate Karen Washington to start a community garden across from the church, which brought Karen back into the church. She said if the pastor is willing to go out into the streets to the people, she would be willing to go into the pews. So this example of incarnational love by creating a community garden to help provide more fresh food for the community attracted her back into the church. Karen has gone on to start a farm in upstate New York and sell the food that she grows at farmers markets, and holds many roles, including as a James Beard Leadership Award winner. Students who are striking from school, which we've seen a lot recently through the global climate strike for the climate, can actually take action in their own schools to address climate change as it pertains to the food system. Students in schools can start school gardens, participate in Meatless Mondays, campaign for a green team, advocate for food and nutrition education to be incorporated into school curricula, decrease food waste from school lunch and initiate a composting system, collaborate with school sustainability or wellness coordinator, and advocate for the expansion of programs that provide schools with technical assistance in these matters, such as the AmeriCorps program called Food Corps. So here's a flyer which Paz will provide you with, that has some of these examples, and it provides education about the link between food and climate change and what schools and students can do. This flyer was created in partnership with the Tisch Center for Food Education and Policy at Columbia University Teachers College and the New York City Department of Education Office of Sustainability for dissemination at the September 20th climate strike in New York City. There are things that we can do at every step of the food system to benefit the environment. We can grow our own food using organic practices, purchase locally or seasonally whenever possible, such as by shopping at farmers markets, minimize purchasing products that have been heavily processed and packaged, eat less meat and conserve energy when cooking, and reduce waste and compost. However, at the center, if we are mindful about the food we are eating and our food's connection to the ecosystem, it can help us to consider the system which provides our food to us and how we can take actions which produce a more ethical food system. Another method which was created by Oxfam is the GROW method, which describes a sustainable way of eating that can improve overall global food security. This entails many of the same steps: preventing food waste, eating seasonally, eating less meat, supporting small-scale farmers, and using less energy while cooking. St. Francis of Assisi actually included instruction about abstaining from meat in his Rule to the Third Order. The instruction is quite relevant today, given the impact of our food system on climate change. He says we should abstain from eating meat except on Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays on account of illness or weakness, and on special feast days. When there is no fasting, you can eat cheese and eggs. And when they're religious in their convent homes, they can eat whatever is served to them. Let all be temperate whenever they eat and drink. So I find it telling as a Franciscan that I found that St. Francis actually did provide this guidance. Sister Ilia Delio, Brother Keith Warner, and Pamela Wood say in their book, Care for Creation, that eating locally is good for our health and the health of the planet. It is good for local farmers, it builds community, and it contributes significantly to curbing global warming. It is the perfect penitent action, requiring intention and sacrifice on the personal level, offering transformative potential on the societal level, and in the meantime, bringing into our lives many of the spiritual gifts that accompany the penitent life: simplicity, community, humility, and joy. 'Cause, 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 So as Jillian stated earlier in her presentation, the Eat Lancet report states that a radical transformation of the global food system is needed. Without action, the world risks failing to meet the UN Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement. So I hope this left you with some ideas about ways you could take action in your own communities through advocating to policymakers, within parishes and congregations, within schools, and within our own lives. So I will be happy to take questions during the Q&A portion of the webinar or afterwards if you would like to get in touch. My contact information is here. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Kelly. And I will be sharing all this information with you all when we give you your recording. So if you didn't get some of these links or some of this info, don't worry. At this point, we will move to our questions and answers. We've got a few and we've got 9 minutes. So I am going to sort of package the questions. We did get several questions on the same issue, and this one will be for Sarah. And Jillian, you might want to also respond at the end. The questions have to do with how do we identify the truly fair trade products? How can we tell what foods are not authentically fair trade? So there's a lot of questions about how do we find out if something is truly fair trade? Sarah, and then Jillian.
That's a really good question. I had a slide about this, but took it out because of the time constraints. But basically, the short answer is it's not easy. It's complicated because there are so many certifying organizations now, and many of them have differing requirements, and some are even certifying large coffee plantations, and one certification agency even certified Nestle's, if you can believe it. But we have to do our homework. There are I think Jillian can talk about Fair Trade America, but if you and one thing I can do is to share the slide that didn't get into the presentation later, and that has the logos of several bona fide fair trade, authentic fair trade organizations on it. Sorry if I couldn't be more specific. Jillian, do you want to add anything?
Sure, I could add something. So the Fair Trade America logo is a blue and green logo that you may have seen. It's a label that has been used for quite some time now, and there are rigorous standards behind it. For anyone to be for a co-op to be certified, for farmers to be certified as Fair Trade America, the standards are rigorous, and it probably takes about a 3 to 8, maybe 12-month process, because the things that have to be addressed, like workers' rights, human rights, there's child labor, climate change is a huge part of that, gender equality. There are various sets of standards that need to be considered. So if you're going out, especially coffee or chocolate, and now it's on a lot of foods today, the Fair Trade America label is a pretty prominent label that has been around for some time that I think is pretty recognizable. And I'm happy to share some of the information, the background information on Fair Trade America.
This is Sarah. I just want one more PS, is that if you see an equal exchange label, you can rely upon that as authentic fair trade. They don't use a certification because they're doing it all anyway, but that's a safe one.
Yeah, and I will add this kind of info, that slide, just send it to me and I'll put it into the email.
Okay.
The next question has to do, and I think it may be for Jillian and perhaps also Kelly. You mentioned some switching to things like avocados, almond milk, but some of those products also need a huge amount of water. So they wanted you to address how we can deal with that sort of exchange.
Yes, I'll take the first part of this. So yes, while avocados and in particular almonds do consume a lot of water, it is still not comparable to how much water is used for meat. I think don't quote me on the percentage, but it's somewhere around 60 to 70% less of water that is used, you know, on beef and chicken in particular. Avocados also, in terms of food waste, they last a really long time. And if you're really concerned about avocados and the water production, you should maybe try to understand where, or if you're buying them, try to buy them local, or try to buy them from a region that is not desperate for water. For instance, Peru, they've had a huge drought. So if you buying avocados from Peru, there is a lot of water wasted. However, it is not comparable to what is being used for meat.
Okay, thanks. Kelly, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, we have to remember that the amount of water and energy and resources it takes is not just in the meat, but the meat itself, but it's also in all of the feed that's needed to grow in order to have the animals eat to get bigger. And then also there's the impact of methane from the animal agriculture that is a huge environmental impact, a really big, it's even a bigger greenhouse gas emitter than carbon dioxide. But that's not something that we have as much of with the plant-based foods. It's more so with the animal agriculture.
Thanks. We've got way more questions. We will farm these out to folks, so you will be answered, but probably more one-on-one. I want to end with this one. The question is, how do we share both this presentation and I would say the entire idea of what we've been talking about with our children and grandchildren? Do you have a resource that is good for kids? And second, which would be my opinion, which is really live it. That is how we would share it. But I want to ask our speakers to pipe in on that. Perhaps first Jillian, then Sarah, then Kelly.
I would have to think about the resources, but to me, it's again asking the question of how do we want to leave this earth, and what has our carbon footprint been, and what is it going to be when we leave it. So in terms of resources, I would probably have to look to see what we could get, especially for kids. There are definitely some out there that I would that I could forward on to you, Paz, that we can add to the group.
Great. Sarah, do you have any ideas on fair trade and kids?
Well, I think the greatest teacher to kids is the behavior of the parents. So for parents to live this and make the choices that we've been talking about this hour, the children are going to see that and learn that and pick it up. Specifically, just one thing I wanted to mention: if people go to the Equal Exchange website, which is full of information, but there are some programs there that are geared towards children that perhaps schools could use, or others that were interested in this.
Yeah. Kelly, if you want to talk a little bit, because I think you've done some work on this.
Yeah, so the flyer that I shared is actually, like I mentioned, it was created in partnership with the Tisch Center for Food Education and Policy at Columbia University Teachers College. And they have a wealth of knowledge and resources about the link between food and climate and how to teach it in schools. Also, Food Corps is the AmeriCorps program that I mentioned that has a lot of these lessons about food that could be taught in schools. And Teachers College actually did an evaluation of Food Corps as well to see how effective it was. So those programs are very strong and connected. In general, I can say, any school that can get a school garden, just starting to get kids thinking about where their food comes from is the first step in both, promoting environmental health as well as our own human health. And understanding that connection between food and climate at a young age is really important. And there's lots of other things that could be done to engage kids around food. Happy to, talk with people afterwards if you would like more information.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for all that are attending today. Thank you to our three speakers. You have left us with a lot of information as well as a lot of action steps, which is really important. We have here a slide that you can email us or check our website. You will be receiving the recording and probably the slide deck, as well as links that have been mentioned. If you have any questions, you can always just email me. If we didn't get to your question, we'll try to answer it individually. But for today, it is now 3:01, so I bid you goodbye, and I hope that everybody has a blessed day. Goodbye. Thank you for being with us.